GreenSense show is sponsored by CEA Technology, providing a sustainable modular indoor growing system. Visit CEATechn.com to learn more. I'm Robert Colangelo, and this is GreenSense, where we bring you eco-innovations that are changing your world. This week, Tom Appel, publisher of Consumer Guide Automotive, will provide a green automotive news update. Tom, welcome back to GreenSense.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Are you enjoying your summer?
I am. Yeah, it's a good summer. We've been busy rebuilding our website, and this is a good time to do that.
Have you driven any cool cars lately?
I just drove, and it's so fundamentally decent and throwback. I was so excited to drive it. The redesigned Honda Accord, which is new this year, and I'm driving the Sport Hybrid, which is the least expensive hybrid variant. So for $33,000, I'm driving a car that absolutely delights. It's roomy. It's tight, it's fun to drive, and I'm getting 44 gallon.
Wow, at 33,000, you can't buy many cars these days at that price. It's and for a hybrid, that's really priced nicely.
Yeah, I wish people still wanted cars because this is a good car.
Good point. Well, let's get into our two stories. One is the Inflation Reduction Act and some loopholes regarding leasing. And next, big news would be the Tesla having an agreement with Ford and Rivian to share their charging stations. So the first one, the Inflation Reduction Act, what's that all about?
Yeah, well, I think we all remember that back in September, the Inflation Reduction Act was ratified. And the most interesting thing about that was it finally addressed a continuation of the federal incentives for purchasing an electric vehicle. As we remember, Tesla, General Motors, and Toyota were about to be Toyota was about to be shut out. GM and Tesla were shut out of the incentives because there was a cap on the total number of vehicles which could have been incentivized, and that was 200,000. And we thought that when this law was ratified, it was just going to be a continuation, but it wasn't. It's very confusing now, and very few vehicles qualify. And essentially, the vehicles now need to be built in the U.S., have their primary constituent components built in the U.S., and the batteries have to be from the U.S., and a certain amount of the materials used in the battery have to be from the U.S. It's very confusing and arguably successful because manufacturers are setting up battery plants in the U.S., which was the intention of this law. But if you're a consumer, the bad news is there are only about 10 vehicles that qualify right now for the incentive. But there's a loophole, and it's interesting. If you lease the vehicle, if you lease it instead of purchase it, all of a sudden, almost everything that's electric qualifies.
That's very interesting. Can you give us examples of the 10 vehicles that would qualify as a purchase?
They're mostly Tesla vehicles and General Motors vehicles because they already have factories in the U.S. to build their batteries. So they're ahead of the game. And the Volkswagen ID.4, which is Volkswagen's compact crossover, also qualifies.
So, Tom, was the intent to lease an oversight and maybe unintended consequences of a complex bill? Or was that intentional?
Unclear. The leasing provision, to some extent, was to accommodate business consumers who typically lease their vehicles and don't purchase them. And consumers typically don't lease. We see consumers that do lease tend to buy expensive European, luxury vehicles. It's rare that your mainstream consumer leases his own vehicle. So the extent to which this is a loophole is unclear. One of the drafters of the law, Joe Manchin, is upset about this particular provision and this loophole. So I get the sense this may have been to some extent an accident.
What is the bottom line benefit if you purchase a car, one of the 10 that are available, or if you lease it?
One of the advantages for leasing an electric vehicle at this point, and this may prove significant, is if the technology advances considerably while you own the vehicle. If you purchase a vehicle and own it, you may lose resale value in the end. If you lease the vehicle, your resale value is locked in. So you can't lose that value while you own the vehicle.
But what is the incentive that you get from the I.R.A.?
Right now, $7,500 is the incentive, and it's still a tax credit. It's not a full incentive. So you need to be able to make use of a full $7,500 tax credit, which does not carry forward to the next year. So if you don't pay $7,500 in taxes, you do not make full use of the incentive.
But you're able to use that tax credit in 1 year, not over the life of the lease.
Correct.
Okay, great. And same if you bought a car that qualified, you get 7,500.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's interesting information, and that's news that hopefully our listeners can use if they're in the market to buy or lease an EV or an electric car. So I think the big one here is Tesla. There's been reports that they have negotiated a deal with Ford and Rivian to share their charging network. Tell us about the details.
There's so much going on here. It's difficult to unpack, but I love this story just because it's interesting. And that's that Tesla, which is known for its incredibly big and reliable and fast charging network, is going to be giving access to its charging network to the owners of Ford vehicles, General Motors vehicles, and now Rivian vehicles, which means if you own a Ford, a GM, or a Rivian electric vehicle, you can tap into, and you will be paying for this access, but you can tap into the very reliable Tesla charging network, the supercharger stations, as they call them. And the best part of the story, I think, is that Tesla is famous for how robust its charging network is. And the other companies that have gotten into this business are not known for that. The existing charging network outside of Tesla is incredibly unreliable, and it's scaring away people.
Yes. And so that's what begs the question. Elon Musk is like a chess player. He's always several moves ahead of everybody. Why would he take one of his biggest assets and make that available to his competitors?
That is my favorite part of the story. And I don't know that anyone knows the answer, but there's a lot of good theories. And one of them is that Tesla is no longer selling cars as fast as it used to, and its growth has been seriously curtailed. And one of the reasons is there's now competition out there. And Tesla's products have gotten very old. They haven't really updated any of their products significantly since the launch of the company. So Tesla has seen its market share erode, and to compensate for that, Tesla's been playing with its prices. And Tesla can famously just change its price. They just go to their website and they change their price from day to day to respond to market demand. But they've been lowering them and keeping sales up, but obviously their margins are going to drop. So if Tesla now has this secondary revenue stream, which is it's getting money from competitors, competitive vehicles on their network, this can bolster them and continue to help them gain market share, or at least increase sales.
There's been some tension between the Biden administration and Tesla. Do you think that there was maybe some back deal cut to allow the other large U.S. companies access to the charging station in exchange for some kind of government benefits?
I don't know. That's a good question, and it's quite possible. Who knows what the incentive was ultimately to do this? We were all surprised to hear this news. Like, we didn't know that this was being negotiated. And it's interesting to see like an EV startup like Rivian jump on this bandwagon as well, because the cost of building this network is expensive. And the additional question, speaking of building the network, is will they continue to expand the network, and will General Motors, Ford, and Rivian be helping to pay for that?
Yes, and will they get a preferred rate, or will Tesla owners get a preferred rate at the charging stations?
Details like that aren't available yet, and I suspect that Tesla owners, maybe to mollify Tesla owners, may get a preferred rate simply because now they have to share these stations. And up until recently, if you were using a Tesla station, you probably never waited in line to use it because all the stations have 20 outlets. They're very large, they're comprehensive, and they tend to always work, which is key. So Tesla owners are probably very happy with the charging network, and maybe a little less happy that they're going to be sharing it now with the Cadillac Lyriq and the Rivian R1T.
Yes, this is a complex issue because on one hand, it may really accelerate the EV market because now, as we've talked about many times on the show, every time we test drive a car that's not a Tesla, we're very disappointed with the charging network, and you're really limited on how far you can go. So by having that available, maybe this will boost all EV sales and lift the whole industry. But
I suspect it will.
But on the same token, if I were Tesla and that was one of my prized assets, I'm not sure I'd want to make that available to my competitors unless he's getting something in exchange, and we'll have to wait and see.
Everything that Elon Musk does is a mystery, and it always seems wrong when we first hear about it, and it tends to pan out. So yeah,
Yes.
I'm interested to actually learn what's happening here.
Well, Tom, anything else you'd like to share?
I'm trying to think what's going on here. Happy to be driving that Accord hybrid that I mentioned earlier. Um, I think the other news too is that we're starting to see um, consumers soften a little bit to the idea of owning an EV. And hopefully that the network, the availability of charging and the name Tesla on the charging network is going to change some minds.
What about the chip shortage and car prices? Are we seeing the chip shortage dissipate, and are we seeing car prices starting to lower a little?
Yes and yes, and it seems like it's very slowly. But the good news is that Toyota's had its bad month and best month in a long time, and that's good news because they were most hurt by the chip shortage. But Toyota is starting to see some inventory, and Toyota sales have actually picked up, which means they have some inventory to sell. It is very depressing to drive past a Toyota dealer and see an empty lot because you just assume the dealer's been shut down, but that's not the case. But everything is getting a little bit better. Prices are dropping. Now, there are very weird stories about prices going up in limited cases and limited scenarios, but nationally, overall, new car prices and used car prices have dropped this year.
Well, Tom, I want to have you back on in a couple of weeks, and I want to talk about Toyota. I've read that they've recently come out with a number of different hybrid vehicles, and especially in the small and light truck category. And so I want to dig into that. Can you do a little research and be ready for that in a couple of weeks?
I would love to.
Ah, fantastic. Well, I always appreciate you coming on the show. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to it.
That's Tom Appel, publisher of Consumer Guide Automotive, with our Green Automotive News Update. GreenSense Show is sponsored by CEA Technology. Visit ceatech.com to see our growing technology. I'm Robert Colangelo. Thank you for listening to GreenSense, and check out the GreenSense Minute every Thursday and Saturday on 105.9 FM, WBBM, Chicago. Thank you, Tom. That was great.
Thank you. That was great. I enjoyed that.